think that the main thing I want to say about this, we've covered some of this stuff in general. One of the things I want to begin to talk about in terms of making this, bringing it down and what it means in terms of the clinical hour is that to think about the brain, one of the things that's changed in my practice about it is that for one thing, I have several brains besides mine and my clients sitting around, facsimile brains sitting around in my office. I have a stress ball brain. Sometimes I almost always talk about the brain with clients at this point, especially at the outset. I throw them the stress ball, and I do this thing that John thinks is really hokey that I got from Dan Siegel. Hold your hands up, just one hand, okay, like that. Go like that. This is our secret sign. Okay, this is and then go like this. Now fold your fingers down. Okay, now open them back up in reverse. This thing right here is your amygdala. Your amygdala is a panic button. This is the psychoeducation I do with patients, and it works really fast. You could say about the amygdala that it is fast, cheap, and out of control. It's hypersensitive. It is scanning the environment all the time for stress and threat, and it's like one of those car alarms, you know, that you have. Sometimes you get these car alarms and they go off at 3 o'clock in the morning, and you know what? It doesn't matter if it's done at the last 5 nights and you're quite skeptical that somebody's breaking into the car. You still have to, you know, get out there in your shorts and turn it off. You have the amygdala will be dealt with when it's really excited, because the amygdala, again, this is for clients, is connected with very strong fibers to the autonomic nervous system, and it will jack up your cortisol level. It will jack up your adrenaline. It makes you breathe fast. It makes you sweat. It changes the circulation and draws it away from the periphery. It basically puts you in a position where it wants you to move. It wants you to react to an external threat. Right next to it, your little finger, the hippocampus, and this is, you know, it's interesting to me that I would say almost without exception, patients listen to this in kind of like this rapt attention, because so few of my patients know anything about the brain. It may not be surprising. I was telling somebody a few minutes ago, I got my PhD from this august institution, and I never took a class about the brain. I knew next to nothing about neuroanatomy for many, many years and have had a successful clinical practice. You can do that without knowing, but knowing something about the brain really enhances it, and it makes you think much more critically about what you're doing and what's happening in therapy. For instance, the hippocampus is not only extremely important. Remember HR, the guy, HM, the guy who had his hippocampus excised and who was never able to code long-term memories after that. That's obviously one of the main things that the hippocampus does. But another really important thing, remember they're right adjacent to each other in the brain, the almond and the seahorse, is that the hippocampus is the brake for the amygdala. So when you do things that develop the hippocampus, you are developing better brakes. You're getting disc brakes on a car that is a real high-powered car with a tricky accelerator. What develops the hippocampus? Exercise. Is that something that we ordinarily think of in psychotherapy? I was, you know, basically psychodynamically trained, and I'm quite good at CBT. Sometimes in CBT we talk about the body, we talk about exercise, but not kind of as a main event and not thinking of it as something that's really an important adjunct. Another thing that's really important in terms of this dynamic between these two things, this is a dynamic that's like physical and it's basically real, demonstrable. We can show you images of it, we can show you evidence. This is an important difference between CBT and psychoanalysis. You know, you're talking about a conflict, an internalized conflict in psychoanalysis around some kind of anxiety thing. it's a reification of some basic brain physiology. So again, with patients, I'm telling them you've got this push-pull thing, and you can affect this. What's another way to bolster the hippocampus? Diet. The things that John mentioned. How much caffeine are you drinking? How many Diet Cokes a day? My friend John talks a good game, but I think he's putting down about 12 Diet Cokes. Okay, then we've got the big one. We've got Big Bertha, which is something like 80% of the volume of the brain is the cerebral cortex in people. And the cerebral cortex, you know, it's like the most highly evolved, you know, it's reasonable, rational, comes up with the Mona Lisa and Beethoven's Fifth Symphony, rap songs, all those wonderful signs of, you know, civilization, language, mathematics. The cortex is supposed to impact the amygdala. In fact, if you look at the physiology, you've got big fibers coming up from the amygdala to the cortex to scare the hell out of ourselves. And you've got much more slender fibers going down from the cortex to say, you know what, I have been through this with you before. I'm telling you, you need to turn off the alarm and chill out. So a brain-based therapy that affects this dynamic are attention-based therapies like mindfulness that bolster and thicken the prefrontal cortex and weigh in on the side of the factors that are calming, positive, that cause us to think of active strategies, many of the things that CBT encourages. And so those aspects, they're aspects of existing therapies that are highly consistent with this. But I find in my practice, I've been doing this for not that long, 2.5, 3 years, something like this, that changing the context, changing the frame of reference, and getting the brain back into the game really changes how I think about these interactions, and they change how I talk to patients about them. So patients can understand it too, and they can get on the web. And this whole stuff that's swimming around about the brain nowadays implies an emotional experience in a different part of the brain. The hippocampus, on the other hand, is what gives us it gives us the videos of our 5th birthday parties, or the time that when our sister left for college. There's a fast circuit to and from the amygdala that goes from, it's a very important part of the brain, the thalamus, directly to the amygdala and activates the amygdala. You see it hyperactive in PTSD and various anxiety states. And again, it does not have to go through the frontal cortex. Then there's a slow circuit to the amygdala that goes from the thalamus through the cortex. So it goes through the cortex first before it goes to the thalamus, to the amygdala, and that produces things that are less flamboyant anxiety states, like generalized anxiety and fears and phobias. And this stuff is particularly subject to extinction through the kind of exposure that CBT uses.